to the BizBlend podcast. I'm your host, Sana, and today we are diving into something deceptively simple but incredibly powerful. What's that? Curiosity. Yep. Now, not the polished, filtered version of curiosity we sometimes showcase at work, but the raw, unfiltered curiosity that can shift not only our careers, but how we live and lead. Now, think about it. How often do we silence a question out of fear that it might sound naive or dismiss a spark of wonder because feels off topic? It has happened with me multiple times, listeners, especially during those meetings when I'm seeing other people asking, all kind of relevant questions. But I feel, okay, let's ask this. But then a second, it's kind of an inner voice comes and I get to hear, just wait, stop, don't ask the question. We'll think about it later. That's how, I dealt with these kind of scenarios in there. Now, just imagine, listeners, what if those moments actually held the keys to our latest innovations? And listeners, joining me is Joe Lalley. He's a writer, speaker, and facilitator who has spent years guiding leaders and companies through the messy, magical process of innovation. From redesigning airline passenger experiences with fears at Google and Cisco to writing about fixing our broken meeting culture, Joe brings both experience and wisdom to the conversation. So, together we'll explore how curiosity, when we stop filtering it, can transform business, teams, and even our personal lives. So, Joe, welcome to the show, and it's really an honor to have you here with us.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to talk with you about this, and I feel like you described this topic better than I ever have. So thank you.
Good. It's because it's so actually uh, relatable. I mean, it has happened with me so many times, and when I was kind of going through the intro, I kind of, felt like a bit of a regret in there. Oh my goodness, what did I miss? What did I miss back then? But yeah, here we are, better late than never. Let's try to understand how it exactly works. So, Joe, you talk about unfiltered curiosity as a powerful driver, not only in business but also in life. But in practice, um, many organizations, from a cultural perspective, they are afraid of messy questions. Sometimes, the implications can be very real in there. So, why do you think curiosity is so undervalued in professional space?
Yeah, it's definitely something I've seen throughout my career, and I think it starts really early in someone's career, and it did for me. In the beginning, for me, it was I felt like maybe I don't have anything to add to this discussion, or maybe I'm too junior. And I happen to be in some environments where that sort of belief was actually reinforced. So I kind of, as you mentioned in the opening, I held my questions to myself. I thought maybe we'll get to that topic later, and I did arrive at that. Uh, as I kind of progressed a little bit, I began to ask more questions, but not curious ones. I would
Okay.
actually show up to meetings with questions that I knew the answers to, so that just in case somebody didn't know,
Yeah,
I could swoop
exactly.
in. So not a great kind of use or productive use of questions. And
Mhm.
then as I became more senior, I felt compelled to know the answers. So asking was this
Mhm.
vulnerable moment where I was showing everyone else that I didn't have the answers. So a lot of things happen kind of over time. And, you mentioned that it can kind of become the culture of an organization. And, it's really
Mhm.
true. An organization that encourages questions, that celebrates curiosity, those are typically, out of all the organizations I've worked with, are the ones that spark new thinking, innovate,
Mhm.
new ideas. If that sort of thing isn't welcome, teams tend to do the same thing they've done in the past and rely on that.
Of course, of course. I think that's as clear as the day, and I really love that vulnerability in there, Joe, because it's kind of once again. just the same thing that happened with me as well. I used to also kind of wonder, okay, these are the questions. Okay, these are standard questions, and I'm expecting that um, whosoever is, leading the meeting in there, they be very comfortable with the answers, so that I don't kind of get myself highlighted or kind of, categorized as a person who tries to ask some weird questions in there. All right. So yeah, I mean, I really love that you framed curiosity not just as only asking questions, but creating conditions where it is safe to do so.
Mhm.
Oh, okay. And I mean, in your career, you have worked with some global brands in there, some big names, Meta, Pfizer, JetBlue. Can you share maybe a time when curiosity led to a breakthrough, or maybe even challenged the assumptions of an entire team?
Yeah. So a few come to mind, and one really stands out. So I won't say who the organization was because I was, um, sort of working
Yeah.
with their internal situations. But I was brought in to help facilitate a workshop designed for them to redesign some of their processes. So they were a team that created learning programs, learning modules to help train part of their staff. And that staff who was being trained was supporting their entire product. So they had a really big, really complex job. And
Okay.
the company was just struggling with how do we deliver these trainings? How do we deliver these learnings? And I did an exercise with them where we peeled it back to what are we doing? So they were pretty capable of determining, and describing what their job was. I asked them, well, how do you do that job? And they were able to describe that, the different processes and tools they used. But then I switched to, well, why do you do this job? And that's where it was difficult. So their why in many cases was, well, because it's our job, or, because that's what I get paid for. And, those are true. But for them to really want to solve this problem, I wanted to get a bit deeper, get to a deeper why. And it was not easy. We kinda struggled through some challenging conversations. I, said, "Let's all take a break, go grab a coffee," and, eventually, when we came back together, they were able to kinda peel back to why they actually cared about solving this problem. And that was such a turning point in the workshop because it went from, "This is my job," to, "I really care." Um, and, they came up with ideas they may not have otherwise. So just really kind of probing through questions, especially the why, made a huge difference for that team, and they kind of took off from there.
Hmm. And how much time did it take, for that shift to happen, from this is my job to I really care for this? Did it like happen instantly, Joe? Or did it require any kind of huge mindset kind of shift in there or a cultural shift?
Yeah. So I don't know if this will sound like a lot of time or a little bit of time, but it took hours. Um, and I think we had the advantage of in addition to a lot of the work I've done around curiosity and questions, I also really believe in the model of a workshop versus a series of meetings. So we were together for 2 days, and that gave us time to focus really deeply on what we were there for. And we were able to get to that deeper why in about 2 to 3 hours out of those 2 days. I really don't think we would have reached that if we were kind of pushing things along in a weekly meeting or, that sort of a thing. So I think it was relatively quick, although those 3 hours felt like 3 months because it was not easy to get there.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Um, and yeah, I mean, you have also an upcoming book, which is Question to Learn. That's a very interesting name in there, Joe. And you suggest that curiosity is a learnable skill. Now, this is something very new because um, I don't think it's taught maybe in the conventional uh, training or educational systems. It's kind of, in I think I'm not generalizing anything, but yeah, in my observation and experiences, it's kind of, kind of looked down upon, that don't ask too many questions, just learn what I'm
Yeah.
sharing. Yeah. So, um, here some might argue that it's just a personality trait, that, this particular person is naturally very curious or very inquisitive. So you either have it or you don't. So how do you respond to that?
So I think everyone had it at some point, particularly when they were young. So there have been
Mhm.
studies that show that young kids, toddlers, will show more interest in a new toy versus a familiar toy. Their curiosity is sort of a learning mechanism and also really a survival tool. So we all had it, and if you go a little bit further to maybe ages 5, 6, 7, 8, that is when we've learned how to speak. We've learned how to
Mhm.
communicate our thoughts, and we start to ask questions because we have this new tool. We can speak, and those questions have totally pure motives. So a child, I talk a lot about the very common scenario of being in a long car ride with a young child, and they're regularly asking, "Are we there yet? Are
Yeah.
we there yet?" That that question has totally pure motives. They just don't know or they want to know. They're not asking it to show that their siblings don't know the answer. They're not asking it to show that they actually do know. They're not asking it to show that they've spoken up in the car ride. It's totally pure, and that starts to degrade over time where we
Mhm.
reach teenage years, we get, as you mentioned earlier, a bit self-conscious, and then, some of those things can creep into the corporate world, and then you have lots of other reasons that questions go away. So I don't think that it's a you have it or you don't. I think it's more of, have you, been in environments that encourage it throughout your
Mhm.
life? I think that's probably the biggest factor, um, because I do think everybody can reclaim it if it's been lost.
That's really hopeful to know. So that's really hopeful to know. And I used to do that a lot with my father. I
Mhm.
used to do that a lot, and he used to sometimes really get, very frustrated. But
Yeah,
yeah, I think that's really hopeful to know. And also, uh, you know, I mean, of course, this is what I do as a podcaster. It's kind of, natural for me to have that curiosity and
yeah,
ask my guests some difficult questions, some really good questions, sometimes some naive questions as well. But personally, Joe, if I want to learn the skill of curiosity, what's one simple practice I can start using today or maybe tomorrow? Yeah.
yeah. So, I think pick a question that you really like to ask, and it has to be something that goes beyond "How's it going?" or, "What's up?" That kind of a thing. Pick a question that you can ask in a safe environment that goes a little bit beyond that. For me, my favorite and go-to question is, "How did
Mhm.
you come to feel that way?" So, if somebody says, I really like that type of food. Oh, how did you come to feel that way? You'll get a story from there, and you'll probably learn about the person. So I'd say a simple thing is start by picking some sort of entry level question that you can ask on a regular basis. If you dial it way up to something, maybe not so simple, one of the main things I recommend teams do, leaders do, is take improv classes. Um, I did a bit of improv with a former team. We spent 3 days learning it, and practicing it, and improv requires curiosity because you have to be paying attention to everything that's happened up to that moment. You have to, be ready to jump in and support your teammates. Uh,
Yeah.
the principles of improv are, no judgment, support each other, be curious, and always think about, what does the scene need? What can I do to make this enjoyable for the audience? So it's a
Mhm.
different type of thinking than I think many professional organizations adopt. where they begin to feel like, well, we know the answers and we know the path, but improv doesn't let you do that because you don't know what the path is going to be.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I agree. And that's really encouraging. I think, it also means that curiosity isn't just, restricted or reserved for the creative types, as we sometimes call, but it's available to anyone who is willing to practice it.
Yeah.
And also, I mean, I know you're great with parallels. You have written about the parallel between marathon running and running a business.
Mm.
Um, and both require endurance, discipline, and resilience. So, how does curiosity fit into that metaphor, Joe?
Yeah, I I do think there's so many things that are similar between marathon training and running,
Mhm,
running a business, and also writing a book. I think those
mhm,
2 are really, really similar. So, a few things about, doing those. You have to really remain open and remain curious about what the future holds because you just don't know how a training run is going to go. You don't know how a race is going to go. You can do a lot to help give you a really good chance to be successful, but you just don't
mhm,
know how it's going to go. So you have to be curious. You have to talk to other people, learn about their training methods and all those sorts of things. And the same is true about business. So I started my own business about 5 years ago, and I had no way to know how it would go. I was curious. I asked everyone I could who was in this sort of a space, "What have you tried? What's worked? What hasn't worked?" And I've always
mhm,
been, really open about helping others, now that I have some years doing that. So I think it's really important to not sit on what has worked. I
mhm.
think a lot about I wrote about this in the book too, but I think a lot about Blockbuster. Um, so Blockbuster,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
for, listeners who don't know the story, they were, a movie rental business. You would go
Yeah,
to a physical store, you would
exactly.
rent yep, you'd rent a movie, you'd take it for a few days, bring it back, rent something else, and really successful. And at one point, Netflix came along, and
Mhm,
Netflix was doing a similar thing, though they were doing it over mail. You could mail your movies back in and get new ones,
mhm.
and and Netflix decided to go the streaming route, and
Yeah,
Blockbuster said, "No, we're not gonna do that."
yeah, exactly.
Blockbuster even had an opportunity to buy Netflix and
Yes, yes, yes.
took
I have
yeah,
lived that. Yeah.
and and, most people know the rest, that Blockbuster ended up getting, you know, crushed in the industry and eventually closed. And it just feels like an example of, sitting on what was working and not being curious about new things and even taking some risks. You know, every
Mm.
every question is a risk, because you
Yeah,
don't know what's on the other side.
that is true. That is true. Yeah, I really find it very, very. It's such a relatable, image. I think this particular example that you gave, it's such a fleeting example of, uh, if you are not curious enough to know what's on the other side, then I think it's kind of really sad to, just decide something or simply make a decision out of it.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so it really calls for deep diving and diving deep, exploring. And yes, it definitely uh, needs a lot of risk in there. And I think curiosity is something that gives birth to this, risk taking.
Yeah.
Mhm.
This part of the conversation has reminded me. So I read a paper where, the author compared asking questions to purchasing stocks. Uh,
Ooh,
and
okay.
I thought it was such an interesting comparison. And so basically what he said is, in the stock market, you can buy a stock that's of really high value and has, a likelihood of remaining there and maybe gain a little bit of, profit from that. But you can also take a chance and buy something that's maybe valued really low, and you don't know for sure where it may go. There might be some indicators, And if it goes way up, you can reap the benefits of that buy low situation. And he says that questions are a lot like that, where if you can ask a purely curious question that you don't know the answer to, then you're
Mhm.
taking a risk, but there might be some really big reward on the end of that, on the other end of it, because you've maybe explored some territory that hasn't been thought about, and it
Mm.
to some really big ideas versus asking a question where the answer may be pretty obvious, probably less likely you're going to uncover some new thinking. So it's a much less risky way to approach questions.
Hmm. Yeah, of course. And before closing the conversation, I think we need to explore both sides of the coin here. So I'm just going to bring some nuance in here, Joe. So now some leaders would say that too much curiosity it slows things down. Um, Asking questions, when action is needed. We often have these two proverbs. Look before you leap and stitch in time, nick in time. So kind of conflicting irony in there. So asking questions when action is needed can look like indecision. So is there such a thing as too much curiosity?
So, shockingly, I would say no.
Oh,
As
okay.
somebody I think you really can't have enough, but I think the perception of curiosity is sometimes, like you said, this sort of, stagnation. We're stuck in asking questions and we're not moving. But in fact, what I really try to work with organizations on is working on solutions in small increments. So first, spending some time learning, let's say it's a customer product, customer facing product.
Mhm.
First, learning about the experiences of that customer to learn what do they really need, what's working for them, what's not working for them. That stuff is actually skipped a lot, by the way. But let's say that an organization has done that work, then it is time to take a stand and move forward. But I recommend small increments. So build an early version of an idea and then get it back in front of those customers and see how they react. So you're still being
Mhm.
curious, but you are moving forward and you're probably getting a lot closer to the solution. So I think it's curiosity throughout the whole process. Your
Mhm.
your answer might be a little bit more refined along the way, but you can't stop being curious.
Well, interesting. That's interesting. And I think that's an important point as well because curiosity it isn't about wandering endlessly. It's about knowing when to anchor questions to decisions. So with that, Joe, of course, if our listeners they would like to connect with you and also uh, get a hold of your upcoming book and also get access to your resources, what should be the best way?
The easiest way is to go to my website. It's joelalley.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn. I do post a lot about these topics there, but you can find me on my website or LinkedIn. And I'd love to chat. I love to talk about this topic. So please feel free to message me directly.
I can see that. And I'll make sure to have all the details in the show notes for our listeners. And, uh, you know, maybe the takeaway today isn't about having the right answers, but daring to ask better, bolder questions, be it in your professional or your personal life. So I strongly believe curiosity isn't a weakness or distraction, it is a compass. So, Joe, thank you so much for this enlightening conversation on curiosity. It is a bridge for connection, both in our boardrooms and daily life. So, thank you. Thank you for your insights.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Absolutely. And yeah, so until next time, listeners, may your questions lead you closer to clarity, growth, and the kind of business and life that feels alive. With this is a host, Sana, signing off from BizBlend. Thank you.